Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining today's virtual conference. My name is Naina Acharya, and I am your host for today. Educational institutions worldwide have learned that hybrid learning, where remote and in-person learning are combined, that is supposed to be the best way to maximize student engagement and enhance the traditional education programs. As a result, IT teams have increased responsibility to support more devices, service requests, and technical issues. It is easy to do with next generation tools that seamlessly integrate within your existing IT environments and workflows, enabling technicians to improve time to resolution. With this context, Freshworks and Splashtop is pleased to host a webinar titled Edu Experts Talk with the theme Providing Fast and Easy Remote Support Anytime, Anywhere. Leverage next generation technology to effectively support students and faculty members. And we have some very interesting names on the panel today. This session will be moderated by Joe Wei, Director, Learning Environments, University of Southern California. Thank you, Joe, for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
Our first panelist for the day is Matthew Craver, Director of Information Technology, Kansas State University. Thank you, Matthew, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Next, we have Ms. Amardeep Kalon, Board of Directors, Competency-Based Education Network, which is also referred to as CBEN, and Assistant Dean, Distance Learning and External Relations, Austin Community College. Starting May 1st, Amardeep will add another feather to her cap, and she will be the Dean of Technical Institute of Environmental Professions at Unity College at Maine. Thank you, Amardeep, for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Next on the panel, we have Mr. Udyan Das. He's the Director of Technology Programs, School of Continuing and Professional Studies, Loyola University, Chicago. Thank you, Udyan, for joining us.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here.
Following him, we have Mr. Victor Chin, Director of Product, Splashtop. Thank you, Victor, for joining us today.
Hi, Nana. Thanks for having me here.
And last but not the least, we have Burke Wokelham, Senior Solutions Engineer, Freshworks Inc. Welcome, Burke, and thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. Yeah, it's great to be here.
With this, I would now like to hand over to Joe to begin the panel discussion. Over to you, Joe.
Again, thank you so much for this opportunity, and thank you, Dun & Bradstreet, for putting this together, because this is a very important time, I believe, in higher education. As we start to emerge from the global pandemic, we've all made a lot of changes over this last year, learning both from a pedagogy side, from program management, up through our technologies that we're using within our classrooms, our learning spaces, both on premises and remotely. This brings about kind of a new reality. It brings about the need to know how we're going to support our customers as we move forward in whatever locality they are, whether it's online, on premises, or in a hybrid environment. So this is a very timely webinar that's being hosted today, and with an incredibly just some heavy hitters here in the world joining us. So I'm humbled and honored to be here and be asked to moderate this. So with no further ado, I'm going to go ahead and jump right into the first question. It's going to be the same question to everyone on the panel. So hopefully you've got some good things ready. And it's this. It's again, looking forward. What role did the global pandemic play in accelerating the digitization of education? Amardeep, let me go ahead and start with you.
Thanks, Joe, for putting me on the hot seat.
You got to pick someone first. You got it.
Okay, thank you. So, we all know that the pandemic hit us. It blindsided all of us, and institutions that had never even thought of going online had to suddenly pivot and go to an online presence. And most institutions did not even have the luxury of going hybrid, which is what is going to be the crux of today's discussion, but we had to go online completely. Now, we were fortunate here that we had a good online presence first, but I have dealt with institutions that really struggled. And I think the global pandemic played a huge role in digitizing education, in taking it online. And throughout the discussion, we are going to talk about some of the best practices and what worked and what didn't work. So I do believe it played a major role, and it did thrust some institutions that were sitting back and saying, but we've always done it this way, and made them think differently and go into the online world.
Totally agree. And I remember talking before, because at USC, we are the complete opposite side. We didn't have an online program before the pandemic, which made us completely have to shift how it is that we're looking for those models. So that's great. Matthew, same question to you. How did the role of the global pandemic play in accelerating the digitization of education?
For us, as a we were like sampling online education. We had an existing platform. We were trying to figure out how that fit into our existing portfolio. And for me, I'm the director of one of our satellite campuses, and our centralized campus had an online program, and how we had to traverse the political dynamics and approach scaling up rapidly our programs to fit into the model that we fortunately already had, but the onslaught of faculty questions to how to set things up on that format, I think, was daunting at first, but it did give our employees a chance to respond, and I think feel confident that as we look forward, the modalities that we offer as an institution can be modified. Now, I don't know if that will happen by fall of 21, but I believe by fall of 22, the lessons learned of 2020 will have a dramatic impact on how we do business. And I'm looking forward to being a part of that.
Absolutely. It's going to be a very interesting time going forward. And what is that learning going to look like? What is that new reality that we're going to live in? It's exciting as it is scary, I think. So Diane, same question to you. How have you seen this?
Yeah, I mean, as someone who has been teaching online for a while, I think as well as actually leading a program that is 100% online since the beginning of 2018, my response is, about time. So I think that for me, what's exciting is I think it can fundamentally change people's perception of what online learning can be. And at the same time, I think there are some real issues in American education that online can address, such as access, distance, like my research into broadband services nationwide, that is a definite connection to education as well. And in some ways, the pandemic has highlighted gaps in digital access that people have. But I think higher ed has a real opportunity to try to bring more people in as they come out of this pandemic. One thing I will say is that I hope that a lot of the toolology carries through and comes back even into face-to-face and live classrooms. So, if it's online collaboration or screen sharing for coding, those sorts of things have a place in classrooms as well, and so do active learning and engagement. At Loyola, we actually, in the course of the pandemic, launched a 7,000 person Teams environment for graduate professional students to stay connected. And I think that is something that is going to carry on even after a majority of those students actually return to campus. So my hope is that some of the tools that we think are only applicable to online, we do try to think about how those are also applicable to classrooms.
I couldn't agree more. I think that this really created or exposed a divide, right? That maybe we didn't know. Personally at USC, we had a number of student workers who you would think that were known as the wealthy school, but how many were left? And we found out they didn't have proper Wi-Fi. They relied on the services we provided on site. that we had no real idea of that impact until it was gone. And I completely agree with you with things that should stay after the pandemic, whether it be things as simple as recording your lecture and having closed captioning on it and having it posted somewhere. That was almost unthinkable for a traditional setting, pre-pandemic, that could really be good for, as you mentioned, the accessibility concerns that were exposed. So totally agree with you there. Kind of moving on with that, now we're going to kind of go, Victor, from your side, how have you seen this play out? Same question, accelerating the digitization of education.
Thanks, Joe. This has been a really good question to have for everybody here because as you and everyone has kind of suggested already, this had sped up the acceptance of using technology for education. As Amardeep kind of suggested before too, is that there were quite a few schools that were just used to the traditional method of teaching in front of the class with paper documents, and then they were scrambling when this happened to figure out what to do. So we received quite a few inquisitions about what we can do to help them to get support for their students. And so we took in a lot of this feedback, and we actually learned a lot about how to make a service that works well for the education community. And we quickly spun it up in a few months so that it was available to the schools. And we see a lot of the schools still renewing the services now because, as you guys suggested, there's still going to be continued interest to provide remote learning. And actually, this probably even provides a great effort for, or great opportunities for schools themselves because they can actually reach more people, more students, with the combination of at location as well as remote. So I believe it's really kind of like you said, kind of kicked everyone in the butt to get used to technology and figure out how to make it work for students and teachers. On top of that, it does increase the loading on IT to support more BYOD, bring your own device, because as you know, students may have a variety of devices that they can try to use for remote access or remote learning capabilities. So it will put a little more effort on the IT side, but it made them think about it and how to make use and work best with the students and the teachers.
Yeah, that's so good because we all thought about this as how many services we need. I can't imagine being on your side. The emails, phone calls, everything that came crashing in the second we all got booted off our campus and we're in a virtual world, figuring out how we're going to support that. And I think this plays right off, the last answer of, okay, we did a lot of these things. We signed our contracts because we had to, but now maybe the value in the service is recognized. So we're still renewing, even though we're going back to, our new, I didn't mean to say new normal, but I did. Okay, so I got it out of the way. I think pivot was already said, so we got that one out of the way too. So kind of off that, have you noticed the same thing, Burke, in where you are and kind of how this has accelerated that?
We have, yeah. And I think I really like that word accelerated because, again, we're a technology provider. So we work with a lot of these organizations on timing, when they want to implement certain things. And pre-pandemic, we heard a lot of, hey, we want to implement, more cloud solutions to make things more accessible. Hey, we want to start implementing things like live chat support within applications. So a lot of higher ed organizations were thinking these things, but they were sort of thinking about them like 2-3 year strategies of how we're going to implement these. And then all of a sudden it was like, hey, we need to get them set up right now. Some of them, we need to get them set up by next fall immediately. So there is this need for, first of all, the rapid deployment of new technologies and new ways to support students and faculty who are all of a sudden dealing with all these new challenges. And then the other big issue was that they need to implement these processes, right? We all of a sudden had organizations saying, we have a student help desk. We got 80 students who are working on this help desk. How are they going to go home all of a sudden and how are we going to train them to start dealing with all these issues that we're not even sure how to deal with? Like you said, Joe, we have people at home who don't have great Wi-Fi connections. We don't not only have to support that, we have to train our staff who are also remote how to support that. So again, it wasn't like universities had to shift what they were doing necessarily, but it was all of a sudden 3 years of things we wanted to implement over the next 3 years have to be done in the next 6 months, and we got to do it very quickly, and we have to train our staff how to do it. So that was kind of a lot of we were seeing. So it was a bit of a scramble mode, and a lot of universities again were better or worse equipped to do that. But that was kind of what we saw on our side, is this big need to implement both technology quickly and processes quickly at a much more accelerated pace than before.
Oh, absolutely. I even look back and just wonder how we did it. Pre-pandemic, you would have said, anytime you want to make a major change or shift, or as he or Steve put in the question answer, the shifting paradigm, you need to do these. How many years would it take, and levels of approval that we did in a weekend, right? And I think that's something too that we're going to start to notice a continued value of, and continue with that. So that was fantastic, and I'm glad to see you've seen that and been able to answer that call. So now this is for everybody else to get engaged. There's going to be a poll question coming up here. So the poll for everyone on the call here is to say, it's a yes or no question, should educational institutions continue with hybrid learning even after the pandemic ends? So this is a simple one. So make your choice, everyone. I'm going to go around the horn here with our panelists again. It's your yes or no. You can give a qualifier if you want as well. So again, I'm going to go backwards this time. So Bert, your yes or no?
I'll start with the qualifier in that I'm not an expert on education, in the sense that I don't claim to know what's best for students. I'll leave that to the experts at hand. So the answer I'll give is I believe, from what I'm hearing from those experts, that hybrid learning will continue. So from a technology perspective, the answer is yes, it will continue, and yes, we need to be ready for the challenges that bring. So yeah, I'll keep that as my answer, but I trust the experts in saying yes, most schools will continue it, and yes, we as technology providers have to be ready to adapt to that as the way things will be moving forward.
Yep. No, good. So I put all the experts after you, so then you can see if you're right or not, right? You can't just follow their answers. Victor,
Perfect,
you're
yeah.
up.
That's a very good way to handle it. But yes, again, I'm not an expert, but I have been speaking with lots of schools due to the pandemic. And what we're seeing is that they have continued interest to do the remote learning in addition to having the on-sites. So a lot of the reasons seem to be that they've found that the technology actually is very helpful. And even beyond this pandemic, there might be situations where students are unable to get into the classroom or some nature of that like that, so that they still will have continued. The other ones is potentially with international students. Maybe that's another opportunity for learning remotely. So these are the kind of the ideas that came up, or thoughts that came up. I'm sure that our very well versed panelists later on will have the exact details for that.
All right, Ryan, that was a pitch right to you right there. What your yes?
Yeah,
No.
and based on my expertise, the answer is a maybe. So I think that remote or online teaching, on-site teaching, and hybrid are three different things, right? So hybrid is when you're trying to do those two things in conjunction. And in order for that to be done, I think there has to be significant support from the IT department and administration at a university. And I think in the course of the pandemic, one of the things that's happened is teachers, especially teachers in schools where there are fewer resources, right, than in higher ed, they have become forced to play producer, director, classroom manager. And, if all of that happens, then education will take a hit. So if universities can figure out a way to make the task of making the hybrid environment possible without burdening the instructor, then yes, absolutely, hybrid should be there and should stay there, and everyone should embrace it. But that's a very kind of strong caveat from my side. And I'll give you an example. The place where I went to grad school is the Illinois Institute of Technology, And there they actually have a department called IIT Online, whose job it is to basically go in and film the professors giving the lecture, put the course materials online, handle all of the logistics that are associated with that. And with something like that, it works very successfully. But the instructor is not burdened beyond managing the LMS in a sense.
Yeah. That was quite the maybe there. You loaded that one with a lot of the contingency to go on, but I think you totally nailed it with it. All right, Matthew, you're up next. Yes, no, qualifiers.
Well, I agree that the hybrid and remote and face to face are three different modalities altogether. And distance learning is nothing new. I know my grandmother took classes where they mailed curriculum to her that she would mail back way back in the day. So the difference about now is that everybody had to participate in a form of distance learning. And we need to provide that spectrum because the need has been there all along for different modalities. And while some of the major issues I think we can all agree in higher education in America is the singular modality that's dominated the enterprise for quite a while. Now we should see a dynamic shift because not only have we had most of our students, most of our faculty, most of our employees trying these modalities out, I think that then the discussion is happening, like right now, about how do we create value there, and how do we create value as a delivery model, as a faculty member, as well as listening to our students. My student workers in my office did not want to go remote and things like that, and I would be curious what their response is now, how they felt about maybe hybrid's better model, and faculty members that didn't want anything to do with these tool sets that they've had access to, but didn't have to choose them before. Now that they've chosen them and used them, maybe they like that remote option, or maybe they like that hybrid option. I think as an IT director, it's my job to listen and help facilitate those tool sets for the faculty member and the students, tell them what tools they have already, as well as connect them to those resources. That's where I see my job as somebody who has one degree from from doing it face to face and one from remote. I see value in the different delivery models. I think evangelizing those became a lot easier after COVID, or at least opened a lot of minds that online has value, where maybe some people thought it as lesser before.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I love how you said, you really focused on, listening and then connecting, right? Because that's really what we have to do at this time with such the unique position that even the faculty are placed in and the students are placed in, being able to understand that and then educating them in the resources that we can provide to assist them in this. And that was actually a really good question that you even posed is, I do wonder how many faculty have changed their mind who were very much against this a year ago, who at least see some level of value at this point forward. So that was great. All right, Mardeep, your yes or no and some qualifiers.
Okay, so I'm looking at it from an equity lens, from an access lens, and from a competency-based lens. And my answer to this is yes, and I'm going to add an and to it. Let me go back to my qualifier and explain my qualifier. So particularly in workforce education, and we know that the demographic of the student is changing. We know that the new traditional student is the one that's between 24 and 35, who's coming back to upskill or reskill or change their career. And what about the student who's working swing shift, who we don't build our schedules for inclusivity. We don't build our schedules for access and equity. We build our schedules based on when faculty are available and when our buildings are available. And that's a huge equity issue right there. So, what about the student who's working swing shift? If you can provide, like, for example, Polk State did, where they did a hybrid engineering technology program. You wouldn't think engineering technology is something that's suited to online or hybrid, but they did it really well, and a student who can drop off their child at childcare, go work their swing shift, and still come and finish their degree. It's a game changer for them. On the other hand, you have students who would die before they sat in an online class because it's just not the modality for them. So I do believe that every modality, and I will echo Matthew's words, is that I can see the value in all modalities, but I do believe that hybrid should continue even after the pandemic, because there are people who get to go to school which they wouldn't otherwise if it wasn't hybrid, because our colleges operate between 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. and there are students who can only learn after 8 p.m.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that this equity lens is one that's important. And as we already talked, you know, it, uh, we got exposed, but we've been able to answer the call, and we've noticed how, and I think we've heard the same things where students have said, I've actually enjoyed the ability to have this, the flexibility that comes with this.
Right.
And now how can we take those voices and create our programs based upon remembering those voices and not wanting to be so quick to run back to what we did before. So
Right.
that's great. You
So
sound
it
like
wasn't working so well before, right? We
Exactly.
had those issues before. So let's not
Right.
rush back to what wasn't working.
Absolutely.
There's a writer, Sonia Renee Taylor, who wrote a line which was very profound. She wrote it in another context, but it really applies to this. She says, we can never return to normal. Normal never was. So and we've seen that with centuries old institutions that have closed because they stayed in the normal.
Oh, that is fantastic. That's fantastic. All right. So a couple of quick things. So the poll results came out. 83% said yes, we should. 8% no. So I'm interested in that 8. And then I wanted, and then that doesn't add up to 100%. So I didn't see a maybe, but all right. And what we going next, here's the thing. We also are going to do some Q&A, and I want to make sure we save some time for Q&A. So you can put that in, and we will catch that toward the end. But I'm going to go to the next question. I'm going to start, Matthew, with you. I'm going to throw this one to you first. We know we're in this new place. We now have to think, how are we going to support this? So, how does, hybrid learning model challenge our IT teams in supporting our institutions?
You didn't realize I was going to set you so well up for that question, right? With my last.
Why do you think I went to this one?
Right. I really think that we're in that transitional learning period right now, and that's why I said I don't think fall 2021 is going to be the moment of change. A lot of you in the higher ed world know there's litigation out there about what tuition dollars are going to do from 2020, and that's influencing, I think, decisions that are being made in 2021 about modality. So after we work out those kinks, as well as having those discussions with faculty and students, administrators, work on our return to campus models or post-vaccine models. From my standpoint, again, listening and communicating tool sets and engaging. I hate to use, they all sound very buzzword-y, but like being visible to faculty and reminding them of solutions or matching them up with those resources. If they're like for us, that we're a satellite, this and that is available on your main campus, and what resources flow freely between those three. One thing I'm doing too is we're running pilot programs for various things. In my office, we're doing Teams calling, adding a telephone number, and I see that as a bridge point towards future operations where we don't need telephone numbers, because I think we learned very quickly that, I mean, how many times did you call somebody just directly in Zoom or directly in Teams versus relying on that? And that leads to a greater conversation about how does funding operate? Are we allocating the same resources to traditional things like telephones, office spaces? And what can we do with those resources that we have now if we are doing things differently? I just think there's so many conversations. And for me, I see it as my job to be present for those, try to be at the table, listen, and circle back with solutions and or connections.
Oh, totally right. I mean, that was great, because I think that, we've already started having these conversations about where is the money need to go? Where should it go? Where can we keep things? And we've noticed a lot of savings now, right? That you can do. I mean, when we all return to the office, are we unplugging our desk phones now? Probably, and I think that that's great. And now we can use that money to maybe answer some of the equity questions, right? And put that in places where we can help our students more. So, but Diane, I'm going to ask you the same question here. So how does the hybrid learning model challenge the IT teams, supporting their institutions?
Yeah, I mean, I think particularly over the last year, there's been a really kind of strong challenge that has emerged. I've written about this recently, but I'm a tech person. I'm a techie all the way, but I'm also always concerned about end users' rights, and in this particular context, the students' rights, right? So my philosophy is don't throw tech at something just because you can, right? And we are going through this transitional period in technology where we're throwing AI or whatever claims to be AI at everything. And I think as tech managers, people like Matthew have a really important role to play, to be gatekeepers of not presenting useless technology that's just shiny to faculty. But at the same time, also thinking about the danger of online proctoring and how once you are if you're looking at my room in my home, that's not the same thing as having a student in your classroom, right? When you have a student in your classroom, that's a student who's in your space. Whereas once you're going to the student that's at home, then that's a student that's in their place. And so privacy becomes front and center at that point. And sometimes we take a problem like academic integrity, and instead of focusing on the fact that it's a two-way problem, right? It's not just the fact that students cheat, it is also the fact that professors are using the same kind of run-of-the-mill tests that makes it very easy for students to cheat, because it's the same 100 multiple choice questions that students can easily go somewhere on the web and find. So to address that, I think technology has a role, but technology cannot fix the problem that what's really going on is students feel like they need to cheat. And then at the same time, professors are maybe not putting in enough thought on what assessment really is, and then setting up exams so that they're not really set up for the learning process. They're just there to like check off a box. So, and I think proctoring, the online proctoring, and now there are some court cases, right? Northwestern University is being sued for their use of biometrics in Illinois. That's just raising that specter of you have to really think long and hard about what integrity means. And if I'm going to insist on integrity from the student, then I have to have the integrity myself to maybe work a little bit harder.
Yeah, no, that is, I love that we, just not necessarily use technology for the sake of it. And I think that there's going to be this learning curve of now, how do we take, that same 100 question test that they've probably given away, for the last 20 years, even if it can be found by asking Dr. Google, it's a little different if you're in, a classroom doing it, right? Because you can't do it when you're in the classroom. At least you have to have memorized it. Well, when you're at home, you're right. That's a whole different thing. That's another computer sitting next to you. And I think that these are big issues that will start to rear themselves up. But also, it means that faculty have to say, how can I rethink how I am going to do assessment in kind of our moving forward? So that was a great point. Amardeep, kind of the same question to you. I mean, how does a hybrid learning model challenge IT teams and their institutions?
So I'm going to ditto what all three of you said and then add on to it. I'm again coming at it from an equity lens, from a lens of looking at the student from the student's point of view. And what Diane said about environment. When you're launching things like ProctorU, and when you're launching things like Respondus Monitor to monitor the student's environment, we don't know what kind of challenges our students are facing. We just don't know. And our students are facing immense challenges with the pandemic. We did a survey of our students. 12% had experienced homelessness. 42% had experienced food insecurity. Now, when you're asking that student that you're in a 1-bedroom apartment or 2-bedroom apartment with 2 kids around you, and oh, by the way, we want complete silence because this is how we're going to assess you, and any movement is going to flag your test. So we need to rethink assessment, and we need to rethink assessment from that equity point of view, but we also need to rethink assessment from an assessment point of view. Are we doing authentic assessments? Are we really assessing what the students are learning? But that I could go on for that for 88 hours and not stop. So I'm going to stop there. But I'm going to tell you that IT departments have really been challenged with the pandemic because we've had to move advising online. And with that come FERPA challenges. How do you talk to a student when there are others around the student? Do you have written permission from the student? We've had to move tutoring online. We've had to move lecturing online. And then comes the question of, do you have the student turn on their video or not during lecture? And there's a whole debate raging about that, which has raged for the whole year. Well, I need my students' video on, and so IT teams have really risen to the challenge. And, both Matthew and Udayan brought up the question of AI. AI has very biased values, and you can go read about it. You can go read the book Algorithms of Oppression or see the Netflix documentary Coded Bias. AI has biased values. So now we are using that software to actually decide the student's future. So IT departments have been challenged, universities have been challenged, and my final takeaway on this is that the solution to this is not the next killer app. The solution to this is a well-designed, equitable, accessible, fair, and actually thoughtful system that involves both IT and academics working together to build an environment that students can succeed in, thrive in, and then move on to their career in.
Oh, that was fantastic. I think that's our mic drop moment there for the for this, because I think you nailed it on so many levels, and we may have to come back to you depending on how many question and answers. You might get your 88 hours, so to keep talking about that. I'm going to kind of leave this. I want to actually ask something more specific now, from a vendor point, from Splashtop's point of view. Victor, this is kind of just tiered right to you here. So, how can remote access help technicians manage and support the hybrid environment?
Great question, Jeff. So with this whole pandemic and probably going forward, their students are all using their devices or maybe devices that the school is providing to them to remotely access the actual other school equipment. For instance, there are labs that you guys have in your schools that for multimedia, for photography, or maybe robotics, and so forth, a whole lots of different things. And they have specialized software or even specialized equipment attached to them. So being able to remotely connect to those remote lab systems and work remotely during this pandemic has been a big demand from our customers that we've talked to. And being able to use Splashtop to get that access, and also to be able to control it in a way that it it helps the students so they don't accidentally step over each other. What I mean by that is, as much as we want to say about students, they're still maturing. So there's that concept of trolling. I learned that term. So we had to build in controls to prevent trolling of the remote lab systems. And actually, it was a very common input from a lot of the schools we spoke with. So we had a lot of these interesting learnings about how the usage can be improved, enhanced. And the one that we've been talking about the most is the hybrid part, which we've been working with the schools as well. So making sure that when somebody who connects into a system remotely, somebody who's physically there won't be able to connect into it. Or if somebody who's physically there connects into a system, somebody who's remotely not going to connect into it at the same time. So again, they're not stepping over each other and causing problems. So, and then doing it in a way, like you mentioned too, you don't want to make your teachers proctors of technology. So it should automatically handle all this kind of controls without them having to think about it. They just focus on their curriculum, their teaching, and it just automatically handles each of them connecting in into the right systems, and nothing for the teachers to have to, go and figure out.
Yeah, so true. Because we cannot let technology be a roadblock to, what our next normal is going to be here. And we really need it to be supplemental and assist in taking down all these barriers that have traditionally been there. And we have this opportunity to allow it to do so. So excellent point with that. Excellent point with that. So moving on, Burke, I want to go to you now. And so you could speak a little bit from Freshworks side here. So specific here, what is the role of a right ITSM solution in implementing a hybrid learning model?
Yeah, so this has been, it's a challenging thing, and universities have always faced this kind of unique fundamental challenge because they have to support a really, really diverse end user base. They're not a typical organization that is providing all the technology and support. They have young students who have a certain level of tech aptitude. They have older faculty who have a very different level of tech aptitude, and everything in between. And with the hybrid learning model, it creates an even bigger diversity. And as Amardeep was talking about earlier, you have students who are going to be on campus using lab devices and they need a certain level of support. You're going to have students who are halfway across the country in a different situation that you can't predict who still need the same level of support. So that's one of the first challenges. And when we look at it as a vendor, we start to design our technology around how do we make sure every single end user needing support can get in touch with support quickly. The holistic goal of the university is to try to educate equitably all of these students. So if you have a student who's at their home with a bad connection and they're trying to log into a lecture and can't, how do we make sure that they can get support very, very quickly, get into that lecture, and it's not a 3-hour, 4-hour process to do that? If you have a faculty who's been using, paper syllabuses, never wanted to use an online learning management system, and they all of a sudden need to be transitioned to that very quickly, how do we provide tools that is easy for them to interact with, easy for them to get support from, and easy for the technicians to support them, again, very quickly? So that's one way we look at it, is every single user, whether it's a student, faculty, whoever, needs to have an experience of that. And the details of that are not just forcing everyone to go to a self-service portal and fill in a big form and wait, but you want to provide, live talk, live assist tools. You want to provide, whether it's people are still using email or phone, you want to make those channels available if that's what's most comfortable for them. So that's one heavy focus as a vendor, is how do we ensure that teams are equipped to be able to do that. And then I think the other side of things is, I think historically, higher education institutions have sort of looked at these types of improvements as processes of like, okay, over summer we'll do a big implementation, maybe over winter we can make some changes, spring we can make some changes, but the rest of the year we kind of keep things steady. We're just sort of moving along. But especially this last year, and I think even in the next few years moving forward, I don't think IT organizations are going to be provided that luxury of just being able to wait until summer to make these things. We have teams having to implement new technologies in a month and then having to change their support structure to support that, right? Okay, now we have to make this software available to people to request. We have to build in the proper, approval mechanisms to do that. Okay, we have to integrate that with our ITSM solutions so we can provide it. How do we do all these things? And oh, by the way, it's not summer, it's the middle of fall, and we're still providing normal support as usual. So the other, demand we've seen, and the other way we've built our product to align with that demand, is to allow teams to adapt much more quickly and implement things much more quickly than they had to previously. Spinning up new, requests processes and things like that. That has to be done in a weekend, as you said earlier, Joe. It can't be this 3-month process because our faculty needs this set up for lectures next week. So that's the other aspect of things, is we need to build technology that allows teams to move quickly and allows teams to support all of their end users in a different way. And among all of this, I think this model of technology providers being just technology providers is moving away too. A lot of, we've noticed a lot of organizations, they love thinking of technology as this magic bullet. Oh, it does this, this, and that. Okay, we'll buy it, and you guys will set it up and it'll be great. Every problem will be solved. But that's, again, not enough. You can buy all the technology in the world, and it's not necessarily going to do what it needs to do or be implemented correctly. So we put a high priority on our internal teams coming in and training people to use it, training end users on how to use it, training administrators on how to teach other people how to use it. Because if you buy technology and it's not implemented properly, or people are not trained properly, it's going to sit on the shelf, and as Udayan said earlier, it's just going to be another thing that is going to be thrown at people that they don't know how to use, and it's going to be more noise in the wind that's not going to be productive. So that's a big aspect of it too, is how do we not just be a technology provider, but be a technology partner, provide best practices, provide the training to actually help organizations use this stuff effectively.
Yeah, no, that's so good. And by the way, I have to disagree with you on something, because every vendor I've ever worked with always told me if I buy their product, it solves every problem I have. No, but actually, I love how you focus on, you were talking about user adoption, really, and getting that, holistic across all layers of the, the organization, from, the support teams to actual users, to the students being affected. There's a lot of training levels that go on, and people who have those different voices. So I love that you pointed that out. And so, all right, this is our Q&A time. We don't really have any Q&A, so I'm just going to go on. I wanted to do a couple of quick thoughts. So this next thing is just going to go both to you, Burke, and Victor again. And I just want you to just give us some scenarios, some quick hits here, on just some scenarios in which technicians could benefit from having an integrated ITSM and remote access solution. Victor, you want to go first?
Yes, the benefit of that is, again, to help with the teachers themselves in terms of trying not to expose them to relearning how technology works. By being able to integrate with Freshworks like we do, it saves, because the technicians are able to set up a ticket, be able to connect into whatever device the user is using that they need help with, help them out, jot notes down, and they automatically get absorbed into the ticket. The end users, actually, like the teachers or even the students, don't even have to know about what's going on. They don't have to pass any information. It's all handled in that integrated fashion. So it's going to help out both the faculty and the students to more easily understand things getting going, and also for the ITs, so to be able to handle more quickly and not have as much of a challenge to explain, you need to go and click this object over here and do the dance, and etc. So it'll save a lot on that kind of effort, which is, as you mentioned already, and as Amardeep has mentioned, is that we don't want to overload the teachers any more than they already are.
Yep. No, absolutely. Absolutely. Completely agree. Burke, what do you want? Can you add on to that? Your thoughts there? Some tips on the scenarios?
No, I mean, I agree with what Victor said, and we look at these types of situations, again, twofold. There's for the IT teams, We don't want them to have to undergo these long integration projects to get these things set up. It should be easy for the technicians to support people right away without having to say, okay, now go open this application and go do this and that, because that just creates a lot of complication. And then the other aspect, again, from an end user experience, which is at the end of the day what it's all about, there's a big difference between a 5-minute resolution time and a 25-minute resolution time. That's the difference between someone getting into their lecture or missing a lecture. That's the difference between a professor having to cancel class or being able to actually do what they need to do. So when you have these integrated full end-to-end support solutions, as Victor said, it's, hey, someone reports an issue really quickly, we can hop in right away, get it resolved within a couple minutes without all this complication and, oh, download this and let's set up this meeting that. And you can get that issue fixed within a couple of minutes. And then all of a sudden, you know, you have a bunch of students who are now not missing class. You have a bunch of faculty who are able to kind of not deal with all the complicated elements of that. So it seems small to just save a couple minutes here and there, but it's actually makes a huge impact on your end users, just that time saved and that ease of use.
Oh, I completely agree. And I think it's really what it has to come down to, right? I mean, if we're making things, I mean, saving time, you can never disagree with saving time and making things easier, right? I mean, those are the things that have been the struggle and really what has caused a lot of frustration and just, and it's the unknown and be able to walk people through that. And so that's fantastic. All right. So as noted before, so to our 3 expert panelists, then I've got a last question for you. Quick hits on this question. And it's this. So what are some of the vital points IT teams should consider in order to successfully deploy a hybrid learning model? Diane, you first on that.
Well, if we're going to be speaking of killer apps, I mean, could we get a banner killer already? I feel like student information systems software needs a real 21st century update. But I think that the reason I'm bringing that up, I think, is having the unity of systems, right? So whenever schools in which IT departments have worked hard to set up the SSO environment so that all of the tools don't require students to now remember a new login password combination, as well as at the same time where they work closely with faculty and explaining to them what different tools do so that they can, you know, faculty can incorporate the things that they would like, whether it's faculty or if it's faculty working in conjunction with an ID who makes that happen. I think in both of those scenarios, the keyword is communication, right? So IT communicating very strongly with other stakeholders in the university, and at the same time keeping in mind that IT's role in any organization is to support ultimately the users within their organization. And at a university, that means that it's faculty, it's staff, it's students, but it's also like these weird subcategories like TAs, but then you got undergraduate TAs and graduate TAs, and they require a different set of access, right? And I think that successful IT departments are the ones that stay in close communication instead of being kind of like prescriptive and saying like, here's what it is, we know best, you know, deal with what you have. The other thing I think is that IT can really leverage all the experiences, and I think we have kind of drilled this theme out a little bit throughout our discussion today in now talking about the fact that, you know, even if you don't end up teaching online, video conferencing is a great tool for connecting with the student who is normally not able to come to your office hours because they have these other issues. That maybe the forums are tired and people are not really accessing the forums so much, but maybe Slack or Teams is a great alternative to that. And oh, by the way, at the same time, you know, we've done the research on this, that 95% of course-related email traffic can disappear because these online platforms work in such a way that a student asks a question, but all 50 students in the class get to see the answer, so that as instructors, Amardeep can talk to this, you get 15 emails asking the same thing, just slight variations. But once I put it on Teams, not only do students see the answers, but a lot of the times it happens that some other students answers the question. It actually saves me a lot of time in the course of the semester. And so utilizing even your kind of academic ambassadors who can speak to their technology experiences, because sometimes they'll say the same thing that you'll say, but professors will be convinced by another professor that they know talking about things much more than if you're trying to sell them on embracing IT.
Yeah, no, that's good. I want to make sure I want to get to Amardeep and Matthew too. So again, really quick hits for you. Some vital points IT teams should consider. Amardeep, you first.
So I'll go back to my previous thing that, and others have echoed it. IT doesn't exist in a silo. It doesn't exist in isolation. It exists to serve. It exists as a service. And in order to provide the service, you have to know what your customers want first. You can't say, well, I'm selling you a 6-pound burger. I don't care if you want a veggie burger. This is what I have. So IT and academics have to work together. And in most institutions, and my colleagues here on this call will attest to that, there is sometimes a mistrust between IT and academics because each feels the other is coming from this alien world. And really, that's not true. So you need to work together, keeping the student in mind, keeping an equity lens. That is most important. What are the systems? If you're giving iPads, are the students able to access all their software in iPads? So that is really important. So work together, build an equity lens, build an access lens, and have it as a thoughtful endeavor.
Love that. Lots of lenses that we have to consider as we go through all this. Absolutely. All right, Matthew, last word to you. What are some
right.
Yeah.
Well, I think
it's actually going to be last word to me. It's the beauty of the moderator, but you get the last one on this question.
All right. Well, I think Amardeep and Udan have highlighted some very traditional frustrations in that role, and I would maybe modify what Amardeep said was IT is a strategic partner. Yes, we provide services, but we work to come up with the solutions in a shared environment. That's my philosophy and perspective on it anyway. I know that's not the perspective of many other departments out there, but technology it makes human processes more efficient. So whether that's delivery in class or working through a spreadsheet, that's what it's for. That's like its definition. So if we're not doing something well to begin with, technology is not going to fix it. I think we approach it through that lens and collaboratively look at solutions in the market, whether that's like a virtual lab versus a physical lab versus, laptop deployment or iPad. I've heard all the solutions, but it has to fit what we're actually doing already as humans. So, and if we look at it through that lens, I think we end up with better outcomes for everyone and a healthier relationship with your IT department.
Yeah. Oh no, totally agree. I love that, and I'm going to go ahead and answer that question too as we close because we're coming to the end here. Vital points to me, and I'm going to say it just like this: we're living in a virtual world, but there's real lives being impacted by our choices. And I think that's what we need to recognize, that there's real tuition being spent. There's real pain that people have gone through. There's real struggles in having to relearn the traditional. So let that be, to take Amardeep's word, let that be the lens from which we continue to look forward. So with that, I do want to thank everybody for being on the panel here. I am going to assume that I don't know if someone from Dun and Bradstreet's going to hop back on and say any words, but I'm going to just say that I want to thank you all for coming on. This has just been a fantastic opportunity to just share and think and remember that we can put things into perspective, and how to put things into perspective as we kind of step forward, and we're already looking to fall and what that's going to look like. And as we struggle through, finding the balance in the right way to serve our customers forward. So this was fantastic. Thank you all. And I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer.
Thank you. Thank you, Joe, for summarizing the panel and anchoring such an insightful discussion. Truly appreciate it. Thank you, dear panelists, for your awesome participation. I really enjoyed the discussion, and I'm very sure that the audience has had some fantastic takeaways. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we have yet another poll to help us reach out to you. Please spare a couple of more minutes and share your views. I hope all of you can see the poll on your screens right now. Please take some time out and share your views.
The answer is yes, just in case people weren't sure. This one you don't have qualifiers. This one is a yes.
Well, what better than ascertaining it from our audiences? Great. Well, with this, we bring today's virtual conference to a close. Today's session wouldn't have been a success without the active participation of all our esteemed speakers and delegates. I would like to thank each and every one of you for taking time out and being a part of the virtual conference today. A special thanks to Freshworks along with Splashtop for their support to this initiative, without whom this conference wouldn't have been possible. Thank you again, ladies and gentlemen. This is Naina Acharya signing off. Take care, stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.